So our first speaker is our founding director of the academic unit, Professor Robert Cox. So Professor Cox joined us in Hong Kong. He started our academic unit in 1995, and he basically provided the infrastructure and started, the collaboration in the Asia Pacific region and in China. He is also the highly experienced aviation medicine specialist. He was in the civil aviation department, and he was an approved medical assessor. And he worked as an aviation medicine consultant before his recent retirement. He's speaking live from us in the UK. So thank you very much, Rob. Over to you.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Oh, hello, there we go. Yep, there we go. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good morning in the UK, about 9 o'clock at the moment. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Just to tell you a little bit about me, I trained in accident and emergency in the UK as a registrar at the Royal Free Hospital in London. That was my medical school, and also as a senior registrar and lecturer in A&E in Salford with Manchester University. So I started out in a way along an academic pathway early on. I was lucky enough to come to Hong Kong in 1989 as a visiting lecturer with the Chinese University based at Prince of Wales Hospital. I won a scholarship from what was then the Casualty Surgeons Association to come and do some medical research, and COHK facilitated that visit for me in a very busy A&E department with good science facilities. After finishing my senior registrar training, I became a senior lecturer and consultant in A&E at the Hammersmith Hospital, their first ever one. Small department, but obviously attached to a famous hospital, which was quite lucky. And following that, I came to Hong Kong as the founding professor and director of the A&E Medicine Academic Unit until the end of 2000. And I've been an honorary professor with the unit since then. And as Kevin mentioned, I was seduced into airborne aviation, airborne emergency medicine, working on helicopters with the government flying service, and then went into full-time aviation medicine, looking after pilots' health and their fitness. Right, so where did my interest in academic emergency medicine come from? Well, first of all, it was curiosity. Why, for instance, do major trauma patients have very high white cell counts, but they still get severe infections? Now, that simple kind of observation as a registrar of people with sky-high white cell counts after trauma led me through a pathway of learning electron microscopy and all sorts of bits of molecular medicine, looking at adhesion molecules. And I completed my MD thesis in the leukocytosis of trauma in 1993, and that's research that I continued when I became the director of the A&E Medicine Academic Unit in Hong Kong. My early training in research in Manchester was quite helpful, because we were looking at patients very early after injury. There was an MRC trauma unit in Manchester, which became the Northwest Injury Research Centre by the time I joined in Salford. And they were doing a lot of research on endocrine changes after trauma. And we took serial samples virtually in the resuscitation room very, very early. And I'll come back to why that was important later. So I adapted those techniques to study early changes in leukocyte populations. From the teaching point of view, I've got a long-standing interest in teaching, particularly in problem-based learning. So what do I believe are the elements of academic emergency medicine? Well, you can use your mnemonic STAR, which some of you may have come across before. The first thing is service. You can only really generate good research questions and teaching materials by the researchers and the teachers engaging in the clinical environment. So that is very important in academic emergency medicine, because posts of that nature have to be planned quite carefully. It's no good taking somebody on as a professor or a senior lecturer when they're expected to do clinical work for 4/5 of their week and they have 2 half days to do research. Usually those half days get taken up with admin and doing audit and things like that. And academics are always judged upon their research output because their universities are also judged on those things. There are research assessment exercises, teaching assessment exercises, and the university has to perform. It's assumed that all clinical academics are good clinically, and they're also good teachers, but they also have to look after some research. So service is important because that's the way people can learn and identify what questions need to be answered. Teaching, that's a core element of promoting interest and engagement within the next generation. If you can't inspire medical students and junior doctors to enter the specialty, then we won't have too many people to continue it up to senior level. Audit is another good way of checking that what we do clinically is valid and it's effective and capable of being improved. And finally, research. There's a responsibility in every medical specialty to advance the specialty by promoting and engaging in clinical research, and that's a key element of any academic post in emergency medicine. Now, as in the UK, emergency medicine in Hong Kong began with casualty departments in local hospitals, dealing with unsorted emergencies, presenting without referrals. And the situation was quite well described by Dr. Elizabeth Tang under her pen name Han Su Yin in A Many Splendid Thing, a book published in 1952. And if you haven't seen it, the 1955 film with William Holden it was called Love is a Many Splendid Thing. It's worth watching. Even if the storyline isn't too good, then the pictures of HK scenery at that particular time is, it's a very good thing to look at. So what about development of emergency medicine in Hong Kong? Well, as with emergency medicine around the world, we have to ask, first of all, was it generally agreed amongst the medical profession that emergency medicine should be recognised as a specialty at all? And if not, why not? Secondly, is the clinical case mix seen in Hong Kong A&E departments suitable for teaching, research, and academic development? Thirdly, since emergency departments in Hong Kong are very busy, does research get in the way with routine work? Will it interfere with the service? And fourthly, would the creation of a dedicated A&E medicine academic unit ever succeed? And these are some of the questions that faced me in 1995 when I started the job here, there in Hong Kong. Looking at the UK, I was around at the time when departments were often staffed by a single consultant who couldn't possibly cover the department 24 hours a day. There was a big debate in, sorry, there's a slight error in the date there, that should read 1971. There was a debate amongst doctors as to whether A&E would be interesting enough to attract doctors and whether they would stay once they started a full-time career post in A&E. And this Mr. Haywood Waddington, who was obviously a surgeon, disagreed with the whole concept of having a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week coverage with full-time career casualty doctors, emergency medicine doctors. One thing he was correct in was that the provision of a 24-hour service was not going to be a quick fix. It would take many years. In fact, in the UK, this letter was written in 1971, but it took another 30 to 40 years before departments achieved sufficient consultant staffing to staff the place 24 hours a day. So going back to our first question, was it generally agreed that EM should be a specialty? Well, talking about Hong Kong in particular now, the Hong Kong Society for Emergency Medicine and Surgery, the council, worked very hard to argue that emergency medicine should be a specialty. But it wasn't generally agreed by all. And it was omitted from a major report in 1988 looking at Hong Kong postgraduate medical education. But I know from personal contact with Professor Arthur Lee, who at that time was Professor of Surgery at the Chinese University, when I came for my attachment in 1989, that his belief was that there would definitely be a College of Emergency Medicine within the new Academy of Medicine. And because of the hard work of Dr. Wong Tai Wai and colleagues and the HK SEMS, that was achieved, and we formed our own college in 1997. Okay, second question, is the clinical mix seen in A&E suitable for teaching, research and academic development? Yes, it is. There's a very rich case mix. One of the things I was charged with when I set up the unit was to handle the clinical training in examination and history taking for the new clinical medical students in their third year. At that stage, it was a 2-year, 3-year mix of preclinical 2 years and then clinical for 3 years. And at the beginning of the third year, we got a lot of new medical students who'd never seen any patients. So as a unit, we took them through hand in hand their first efforts at taking a history and doing an examination. And we used the observation ward for that purpose, where we had a turnover reasonably good at that stage of cases coming through. And emergency medicine gives very relevant teaching material that assists in meeting the Medical Council of Hong Kong objectives in teaching. We'll come back to those a little bit later. There are many important and time-sensitive emergencies coming through the emergency department that have not been studied fully in the early phase. Now, thinking about strokes and myocardial infarctions, there's been a lot of early research happening. That wasn't always the case. Trauma is another one. Just show you a graph here of some of the research that we did on lymphocytes, lymphocyte numbers, and post-injury time. You can see on the left-hand side here, we've got samples taken very early, within the first 4 or 5 hours of injury in the A&E department. And these are the same patients 10 to 30 hours later. Now, if you want to know what's happening with mobilization of lymphocytes and what's happening in the immune system, you've clearly got to do that research in A&E and not when the patient gets to the ward later. So this is an example of a time-sensitive research project that we were able to do. So Hong Kong emergency departments are very busy. One of the worries amongst the clinicians and the chiefs of service at that time when I joined were they able to actually support research? Would it not take the staff away from their normal duties? And the realities of the problem in the Prince of Wales Hospital A&E department in 1995 and 96 were a very high caseload. The 2 new hospitals in the new territories had not yet opened, and so we were seeing 229,000 attendances in the PWH A&E in 1996. The staffing was limited, but actually much better than in the UK NHS. The last lady speaker from Singapore mentioned that she'd done the FRCS A&E in Edinburgh. I did as well. And in the A&E department at Prince of Wales in 1995-96, we had 8 people who'd done the FRCS A&E. And I think possibly it was the the best and most well-equipped department in terms of staffing with people with that level of training at the time. That examination was very popular with Hong Kong trainees. And in fact, during my time at Prince of Wales, as the director of the unit, we ran a conjoint version of the FRCS A&E, which gave trainees, if they passed the exam, the intermediate exam of the Hong Kong College, and also the full FRCS A&E of the Edinburgh College. Later on, that changed to a membership, but that was just a rejigging of the grades. It wasn't a downgrading of the exam at all. But again, the clinical case mix available at Prince of Wales was very helpful in organising those exams. Third question. Same again. They're very busy. Will it interfere with research? No, not if the research is properly organised and resourced. We were lucky enough to be able to recruit some research nurses who were ambassadors to the A&E department and who encouraged staff to call them when trauma cases came in. And I think that has continued since with research in stroke cases that Colin and the current staff are doing. The key thing is that all the emergency department staff need to feel valued and involved in the process and also share credit for the results. When we wrote a little book for the 5-year anniversary of the unit, it was in effect a colour magazine. We listed in that magazine every member of staff, including the healthcare assistants, because all of them had contributed in some way to the research that we were doing. And we provided a copy of this review to everyone by way of thanks for the help they've given us. Okay, so would it really succeed? Would an A&E Medicine academic unit ever succeed in improving knowledge? Well, yes, and the fact that Colin and Kevin and the staff are there means that the project continued, which is great. The unit has a track record of very varied, relevant research. It's ranged from simple things like looking at the fire resistance of emergency services protective clothing, through quite complicated research projects, double-blind randomized controlled trials of analgesia in A&E, for instance, to the molecular end of the spectrum, where we've engaged in techniques such as electron microscopy and flow cytometry to measure adhesion molecules, and also some quite detailed research looking for markers in stroke, heart attacks, and various clinical problems that present to A&E. Again, taking advantage of the fact that we can get those things very early from patients with the appropriate consent and with a dedicated research nurse to start the process. There have been 624 full publications in peer-reviewed journals in the first 20 years of the unit's existence, sorry, 25 years. And many of those have had high citation rates in very good journals. There have been countless presentations at conferences. I don't think we've even kept figures for the number of those that have been done. But that presence at international conferences is routine and also extremely important in a very international specialty. We've run both diploma and MSc courses in pre-hospital and emergency care with 231 graduates, 62 of whom have done the diploma, but many of those who did the diploma carried on to the MSc. As you can see, there are a lot more MScs than diploma students and graduates. And there's been some acknowledgement along the way from the Medical Council of Hong Kong, which has been very gratifying. So what about in addition to that last question, would such a unit ever succeed in stimulating and nurturing research efforts outside of the unit? Well, the answer to that also is yes. We started out fairly early with a research methods course run by the staff of the unit in 1999 to 2000. It was run over 9 months on a very part-time basis, and trainees and people from medical officer and senior medical officer level all around the hospital authority in A&E came to us, and we helped them to start research projects. They designed and executed a research project under our supervision and help. And by the time that course had finished, 4 projects were ready for acceptance at the International Conference on Emergency Medicine in Boston, USA. I think one of the key things the unit has done is not remained insular. It's no good if you've got an ivory tower that does research and publishes papers. It's really got to spread that word outside, and I think that's what we've tried to do over the years in a lot of different arenas. Okay, so just a word about how the unit was formed. It was established as a faculty-based unit within the Faculty of Medicine of the Chinese University. And although administratively it needed to go under a larger department as a simple unit, and in our case, the Department of Surgery, it had its own one-line budget, and the director reported to the faculty dean rather than to the head of surgery, although there was a close relationship between the unit and the parent department. So it's established with a remit to train medical students to manage emergencies, and also to take on the task of teaching clinical skills in the 3rd year, and also to promote research. So the core objectives of the A&E medicine curriculum, which we set after the survey of what all the other departments were doing at the time, was that the students, by the time of their graduation, should be able to collect adequate information in terms of history and examination from any patient presenting in an emergency, be able to analyse the clinical information and identify the patient's problems, and to be able to write plans for the management of each problem. Secondly, that the students, by the time of their graduation, should be able to identify the following life-threatening emergencies and make appropriate assessment and start appropriate therapy without looking at textbooks. And that's one thing that we initially introduced into the OSCE for the final examination for trainees around that same time. You can't expect emergency medicine doctors to know everything, but you can expect them to know where to look. So we had a big pile of textbooks in the middle of the OSCE that the trainees could go to during the exam to look at, even during the final. So I won't go through all of these emergencies, but we did the important things like cardiac arrest, major trauma, burns, and these things. You'll note that that list is not exhaustive. That's because during the survey of the other departments, we found out that they were teaching some things quite effectively. There's no point of us taking on, say, the emergency management of appendicitis. The surgeons were doing that already. What they weren't doing was teaching chop wounds, which were unfortunately quite common in Hong Kong, gunshot wounds, which were not quite so common, and things like people who've been run over by buses. So those things were not covered in any part of the curriculum. And also, we wanted the students to know about the emergency medical system in Hong Kong, including the accident emergency services, the ambulance service, and how the agencies responded to major disasters in an integrated way. And I know that's a big interest of Kevin's. Okay, so just coming to the end here, to facilitate the teaching of the medical students, we created various materials. I mentioned that we took them through their first baby steps of seeing patients, taking a history, and doing an examination. And the top three documents here were a file, an A4 file. Sorry, I'll just go back. An A4 file which included some case notes, student clinical history and examination, a pad of paper, which mirrored the case notes used by the doctors, but were not put in the patient's record, but which the students could keep for themselves. Problem list, where they could identify the major problems, whether they're active or inactive, and what plans they would make for the treatment of those problems. We published a booklet on the less common emergencies that we covered, and also a self-instructional manual on how to write problem-orientated medical records, which gave a structure for them to work out how to make diagnoses, write plans, and how to follow them up. Now, this was looked at by the Medical Council of Hong Kong in March 1998 during their official visit to the Chinese university to look at their medical curriculum. And they said the A&E Medicine Academic Unit has been set up to ensure each medical student has the opportunity of learning how patients are managed in the A&E department. Students are expected to be able to identify and manage life-threatening emergencies. And they found it an impressive program, and the visiting team believed that such a program enriched the teaching curriculum, which was a great deal of encouragement 3 years, well, 2.5 years actually, after we started the unit. Right, thank you very much. Welcome any questions.
So thank you very much, Rob. I'd just like to remind all the participants who's joined us in the afternoon session, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box, and then I'll read out the questions to the speakers. We probably have time for one question. I'm not sure if Colin wanted to ask or say something. Please.
I'll keep it nice and quick. It's more a statement as much as a question, but thank you, Rob. Ling, my esteemed colleague, has miraculously managed to find out the number of abstracts after your comment.
Oh,
wow. 628 up to now. But she reminds me that there have been no abstracts at all since 2020 because of COVID. And of course, many meetings, there are no abstracts. So in fact, I suspect the number of presentations could be anywhere up to 1,000, maybe 800 to 1,000. It's hard to know. It's a lot. So
yes,
your legacy continues.
that's really good, and it's very much down to you.
Oh no, all a big team.
Right.
That's all I've got, Kevin. Thank you,
Rob. Maybe I can ask Rob a quick question. I know that Rob has a keen interest in transportation, especially aviation. And I know you've done a lot of work, and your linkages with different government departments has enriched our PEC program, continue to this day. Just wondering, how did you draw that link, and what was the experience like back then?
Very often it was those government departments coming along to ask about specific issues that they were facing. I mean, just one that springs to mind, the Civil Aviation Department were concerned that there was a biohazard at aircraft accident sites and wanted some advice about how to make a kit up to make it safe for the accident investigators. There have been any number of small things like that, small and large things. The Transport Department were studying fatalities in road accidents and wanted some help with analysing those. So sometimes it was the departments that came to us, and sometimes as part of our research, we went to the departments to ask for information. And then because of the curiosity that generated, they would come back and take interest. Yeah. Sometimes as part of our research, we went to the departments to ask for information. And then because of the curiosity that generated, they would come back and take interest. Yeah. Sometimes as part of our research,
we went to the departments to ask for information. And then because of the curiosity that
Oh dear, it's on a loop.
come back in
Take interest.
yeah.
Sorry, some technical issues. Apologies
Yeah.
for that. Rob, please go ahead.
No, that's fine. Thanks. I think I've finished now. Did you get the answers to the question?
Yes, very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Because, I think one year we continued. We took our students to the CES to have a look, and it's fascinating. A lot of students wondered, how can we ever get to visit CES, and how did that link come from? So yeah, just very pleased to see how the early curiosity and collaboration sprung into a lot of subsequent fruitful collaborations. So just another note of congratulations. Thank you.
Pleasure.